Okay, so we'll get started for today. This should look vaguely familiar to you. Looks like almost like the quiz I had you do a couple weeks ago. But this is what the quiz is going to look like on Friday. It'll be similar to this. Same format. There's going to be less of these questions here, just because I don't want it to be, I know the first time y'all said it was kind of a time crunch. So hopefully this is a little bit less time consuming. But on that note of the first quiz that looked like this, okay, I had my grad assistant grade it, and I just found out today that according to SU policy, I'm not allowed to have my grad assistant grade things. So my mistake is y'all's gain, so I gave everyone 100 on it, okay? So I just posted that today, so everyone's got 100 on that one. So that should help your grade. And I'll grade them all myself from now on. So I don't know what the reason for that policy is, but I'm sure y'all don't mind getting a free 100. So, okay. So what we're going to do today, and I'm going to try to stay over here and do everything on the projector today because I'm also recording this. So I'll post this lecture up on Blackboard today. So if you're struggling and don't understand it all, or you lose focus and aren't paying attention or whatever, you can go back and look at this again if you want to before Friday. Okay, so this to the left here, I know it's probably a little hard to see the account titles from the back of the room, but this is the unadjusted trial balance. So this is December 31st, 2014, right here. And unadjusted trial balance, so we just took the balance that was in these accounts as of this day before we did any adjusting entries, okay? And then the requirements here say, okay, first, open the ledger accounts in T-account form or T-chart form with their unadjusted balances. So you would basically list all of these accounts out with either the debit or credit balance that they have. And I've already done that for you right here, okay? So I don't want you to waste your time doing that. That's pretty easy. And you'll see some of them don't have any balance in them yet, so I just left it blank. But I'll do that for you on the quiz as well. First step will already be done for you. So next step is to journalize the adjusting entries for this business at December 31st, 2014. And so that's basically these transactions right here we're going to do journal entries for, okay? So I have A, B, C, D, E, and F listed right here. So this is where we'll do the journal entries. The first one says office supplies on hand at year end are $200, okay? So that means that's what's left. So my office supplies T-chart, after I do this adjusting entry, should have a debit balance of $200 in it, okay? So that's just a hint of what the T-chart should look like. But right now, what the balance before I do the adjusting entry, the balance here is $1,000, okay? So that means I used $800 worth of office supplies during the period, okay? So my journal entry that I do right here is going to recognize an expense for the office supplies that I used. And we see right here from the trial balance, remember, any journal entry that I do is only going to use these account names right here, okay? So these are the only things I have to choose from. And since I'm recognizing an expense, I look down here at the bottom because that's where all my expenses are listed, and I see a supplies expense line item, okay? So that's the one I'm going to use. So I have a debit to supplies expense, for $800 and a credit to office supplies for $800. Okay? And when I do that, and this will be the next step, is actually putting it on the T-chart, but you can see from the office supplies T-chart, it's got $1,000 on the left side. This entry right here will end up putting $800 on the right side, and that will leave me with a $200 debit balance in office supplies, which is what this is telling us right here. Okay? So any questions on how I got either the numbers here for the amount that I used, or what the journal entry looks like? I meant to make you guys tell me the answer here, but what type of my adjusting entries is this one right here that I just did? Prepaid expenses, right? So the only reason I ask you, I don't really care that you know what type. The only reason I ask you that is if you know what type it is, then you'll know what format the journal entry should look like here. Okay? So B, depreciation on furniture, $2,000. Okay? Since it says depreciation right in the title, then you don't even have to figure it out, right? You should know that's a depreciation problem. And I basically have two accounts that are going to have any depreciation on them. And the way I know that is because if I look over here at the expenses, I have depreciation expense furniture and depreciation expense building. Okay? So those are the only two depreciation expense accounts that I have on my trial balance. So it's going to be one of these two. The question says depreciation on furniture, so I know I'm going to use that one. So if you look at what your template looks like for doing depreciation journal entries, you have some type of depreciation expense, and in this case, it was furniture, $2,000, and credit. The format is going to be credit to accumulated depreciation. And if you look up here, we have two accumulated depreciation accounts, one for furniture, one for building. So I will just label this one as furniture. And that's my journal entry for that one. Questions on the template or how I got, the number was easy for that one because it was listed right there. So basically all you had to do for that one is see the word depreciation, go look at your template that shows you depreciation format is depreciation expense, accumulated depreciation, debit and credit, like you see right there, and the amount. Okay? So the next one, very similar to that, except now we're talking about the building, and we have a depreciation expense of $1,000 for the building. So it's going to be the exact same format, as the one we just did. It's just going to be the building instead this time. Okay, so those depreciation ones should just be gimmies for you guys. The template never changes except for maybe having a specific account name here instead of just a generic depreciation expense, and the numbers are given to you. Okay? D, salaries owed but not yet paid, $500. Yes? Say again? To B? You mean to go back up more, or are you good? You good? Okay. So we're on D, salaries owed but not yet paid, $500. If the company owes something and hasn't paid it yet, what type of adjusting entry am I talking about here? Well, accounts payable may be one of the accounts that I use. So remember, we had basically 4 different types of adjusting entries. Okay. I think I heard it. Someone, what did you say? I didn't. Accrued expenses. Okay. Accrued expenses, remember, is something the company owes but is not yet paid. So if you have that template down, then you should be able to record that. So if I look over here at my payable accounts, I have accounts payable and I have salaries payable. Okay. So since this is salaries and I have a specific payables account allocated to salaries, I know that I'm probably going to use that one. Okay. But format is going to be recognizing the expense as soon as I incur it. So I've incurred that expense. So I need some type of expense account related to salaries. I see right here that I have one called salaries expense. And like I said, since they have a salaries payable account, that's the one I'm going to use. I probably wouldn't mark you off if you put accounts payable instead. That would change how your T-charts look a little bit. But as long as you understood that this was supposed to be a payables account, I would be happy with that. Okay, so format is for accrued expenses, you have an expense account, and you have a payables account. Okay, and since this one was related to salaries, I have a specific salaries expense and a specific salaries payable. So any questions on how I did that one using the template? So then I have accrued service revenue. Well, right there in the title, what does that tell you that this, what type is this? Accrued revenue. Okay, so what's my debit and credit here based on these accounts over here? Accounts receivable. So every accrued revenue problem that you deal with will have accounts receivable as the debit. Okay? And in the credit, since it said service revenue, we look over here and try to find a service revenue account, and there it is right there. Okay, so this is going to be a credit to service revenue. So what's happening here is I'm recognizing $1,300 worth of revenue, but I've not got the cash for it yet. And then we have one more type that we're going to look at. And again, right there in the title, it tells me what type this is. What type is it for F? Unearned revenue, right? So what does that mean? That means I'm receiving $3,000 of cash. So the debit's going to be to cash for $3,000. And the credit is going to be to what? Well, we take a look over here at our different accounts that I have to choose from. And I see one here called unearned revenue. Okay, so since this is an unearned revenue problem, that's where I record it. So that's what my journal entries look like. Okay, if you look at your templates for the various different types of adjusting entries, this should match those. Okay, started with the prepaid expense. We had 2 depreciation problems. Then we had an accrued expense problem. Then we had an accrued revenue problem. Then we had an unearned revenue problem. Okay, so that covers all 5 different types of items that we looked at when we talked about adjusting entries. So now we've just completed requirement 2. And all we need to do is post these adjusting entries to the T accounts for item 3 here. Okay, so again, all I'm doing is looking at the individual journal entries, one line at a time, and putting either that amount in the left side or the right side of the various accounts. So for A, I have a debit to supplies expense for $800. I find my supplies expense account, and I put $800 on the left side. B, credit to office supplies for $800. Find my office supplies account, put $800 there. So I'm done with transaction A. Transaction B starts with a debit to depreciation expense furniture for $2,000. I find depreciation expense furniture, and I put a $2,000 debit on the left side there. Then credit to accumulated depreciation furniture for $2,000. Right side, done with letter B. C, debit depreciation expense building for $1,000. Left side of depreciation expense building, credit accumulated depreciation building $1,000. Well, that's over here. I'm done with C. D, debit salaries expense for $500. Find salaries expense, debit for $500, credit salaries payable for $500. I'm done with letter D. E, debit accounts receivable for $1,300. Credit service revenue for $1,300. I'm done with E. Finally, F, debit cash for $3,000. Credit unearned revenue, $3,000. Okay, does anybody have any problems with understanding how you go from the journal entries to putting those into the T-charts? Pretty basic, right? Just read it. Debit, put it on the left side. Credit, put it on the right side. And then we're going to go through these and make sure we know what the balances are in each of these. Okay, so for cash, what's 6,000 plus 3,000? 9,000, so that's my balance here. 5,000 plus 1,300. 6,300. 1,000 debit, 800 credit. 200 debit. Furniture stayed the same. Accumulated depreciation furniture, 4 plus 2,000. 6,000 credit. Building stayed the same. Accumulated depreciation building, now 31,000. Land stayed the same. Accounts payable stayed the same. Salaries payable, we only had one entry, $500. Credit. Unearned revenue, 8,000 plus 3,000. 11,000 credit. Mudge capital stayed the same. Mudge withdrawals stayed the same. Service revenue, 60,000 plus 1,300. 61,300, right? Salaries expense, 16,000 plus 500. 16,500. Supplies expense, just the one entry. Depreciation expense furniture, just the one entry. Same here. And nothing for advertising expense. Okay? So now I've put a total down at the bottom of all of these, and all I do for my final requirement is take that total and put it into my adjusted trial balance. So cash, $9,000 debit. Accounts receivable, $6,300 debit. Office supplies, $200 debit. Furniture, $10,000 debit. Accumulated depreciation furniture, $6,000 credit. So I go over to the credit side, $6,000. Building, $40,000 debit. Accumulated depreciation building, $31,000 credit. Land, right here, $10,000 debit. Accounts payable, $2,000 credit. Salaries payable, $500 credit. Unearned revenue, $11,000 credit. Mudge capital, $12,000 credit. Mudge withdrawals, $25,000 debit. Service revenue, $61,300 credit. Salaries expense, $16,500 debit. Oops. Supplies expense, $800 debit. Depreciation expense furniture, $2,000 debit. Depreciation expense building, $1,000 debit. And advertising expense, we did nothing there, so 0. Okay. If you just left that blank, I wouldn't count you wrong there either. Okay. So now we just got to make sure that the debit side and the credit side balances. Okay. So I'm just going to add up everything in the debit side. I get 120,800. Add everything here. Okay, so I'm 3,000 off. Where did I make my mistake? Let's see. Oh, advertising expense was supposed to have a $3,000 debit balance to start. That's where my mistake was. Okay, rebalance. Yes. On that part at the bottom? It doesn't necessarily mean you did it right, but probably. If it doesn't balance, you did it wrong. Okay? So to be right, it has to balance. Now, you may have done something. Let's say, for instance, that instead of using salaries payable, you used accounts payable. I wouldn't take points off for that, but it would still balance, but it would technically not be exactly right. There's other things that you could do to make it balance, but still, it's basically, if you messed up and chose the wrong account name for something, which I probably wouldn't take off as long as it was the right category, it would still come out in balance if you did it right that way. You just use the wrong names. But more often than not, if it balances, you probably did it right. Okay. Any question as to how I went from step 3 to 4? Taking all these totals here, putting them on the adjusted trial balance. Okay. Any questions overall on how I did any of this? Yes?
I think it's easier than like business stuff because I think my problem was I like
Okay. Okay.
I think it makes sense when you explain which journal entry, like which category it goes in. So like I never get this now before I probably wouldn't understand it.
So you had problems when you did the journal entries. Was it problems with not knowing like which names to use, account names to use?
Yeah. I guess I should have been before. That's
Okay.
Which categories it goes in, but now that I know, I think when I fix my journal entries and make sure they're right, then it'll be easier to
That's pretty much, I mean, the journal entry is really the only part on here where you're not just kind of copying and pasting numbers, right? Otherwise, you're basically just looking and saying, okay, does that say debit or credit? Where do I plug it in down there? Then I'm just totaling it up and putting it, I'm just moving numbers around, okay? But for the journal entries on this quiz, as long as you can pinpoint what type of adjusting entry it is, you should be able to just look at your templates that you already have and say, okay, this is that. Okay. So one question before, well, are there any other questions first? Yes.
Do you want us to do a description?
Well, let me get to that because I'm gonna talk about one other thing as far as the format of the quiz goes. Okay, but I will get to that question. Any other questions?
For the office supply, so if like a t-shirt is like that, how you subtract, is it always on the debit side? Like what if the credit side?
Okay, so for office supplies and most type of asset accounts like that, if you ever get the numbers swapped like that, I mean that doesn't actually make sense because you can't really have negative office supplies, right? But what's your question? If you had swapped those, would you get it wrong or what?
Like, what if, I guess it would be like, I know you can subtract when you have like a bigger debit.
You're just talking about getting the balance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm just like, what if something like that was only, I guess,
yeah.
And it's like, do you subtract so you can get the debit or are you trying to get the credit?
Basically, okay, the easiest way I think to do it is, okay, you see two numbers here, right? Take the bigger number, subtract the smaller number. Okay? Whatever that answer it is, you put that on the side of the biggest number. Okay? So if it had been swapped, you would still take 1,000 minus 800, but the 200 would then go on the bigger side. Okay? Any other questions on that? Okay. Does everybody have access to a computer that they can bring to class on Friday? Yes? Okay. Do all of those computers have Excel on them? Okay. I just got a memo today about me not being able to print off a bunch of copies in the copy room. So I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with y'all's tuition, but apparently I can't use it to make copies. Anyway, I'm going to have you guys take this on your computer here. Okay, so come to class, but everybody is going to be taking it on the computer. So it will be on Blackboard. You'll basically get an Excel spreadsheet that you'll click on that will have the question and basically everything that this had on it. Okay, so the T-charts will have the initial balance already put in there. Okay, the names. Should be a little easier too that way because then you can use Excel to add for you. And I don't love doing it that way, but it is what it is. Okay, anybody have a problem with that? If you do and don't want to raise your hand, come see me separately. Okay. Other than that, it's exactly what the quiz will look like, just different scenario, different numbers, and probably a few less journal entries. Okay. Other than that, I will. Well, I won't see you on Friday, but I will see you all on Monday. There is class Friday. I just won't be here. Unless you don't want to take the quiz. If you want to zero on the quiz, you can skip class. One and two, you mean? Yes. What's your schedule like today? Or when do you want to take it? Let me shoot you an email, and I'll. Well, actually, will you email me and just tell me what's your class schedule and I may have you just take one of your own, so I'm going to just email you back and say here's the figure. If you email me, that will remind me.
I know it's hard to do.
Did you take it twice already? Okay, yeah. You still have another 10 until Friday.
No, I mean, that was last week.
Yeah, I know. I opened it up so everyone has 2 attempts on it.
Oh,
And it should be open until this Friday.
okay.
So you can take it.
All right.
How you doing? Okay. Yeah. Right now? Yeah. Want to come back to my office?
And is there a way I could possibly do like the quiz early?
Are you not going to be here on Friday?
I'm trying to go home early on Friday.